So, welcome again. Nice to see you all here. And tonight I'm going to talk about the idea of compassion. Is that okay? Yeah? Give me permission? Okay, thank you. I can go ahead. Just checking if everyone is okay with that. So, I probably would talk about that anyway, even if you didn't agree. So it's kind of pointless exercise. But so I'm going to talk about compassion. And one of the things I want to do, as I always like to do, is to compare the way the Buddha taught compassion, how it is explained in the early Suitors, and compare that with how we do things today and whether we are getting it right. Yeah, it's one of those things I always like to focus on, is what the Buddha taught, because the Buddha is like the standard that we should follow. And if we understand what the Buddha taught, then we can maybe apply these things in the right way. It's such an important way of inquiring into what Buddhism is all about. The Buddha was the one who we have to assume had some deep insight into reality. If he didn't, it's kind of the whole thing kind of falls apart. So that's why the Buddha's teachings are special. So what do we find in the early Buddhist teachings about the idea of compassion? You sure you want to leave already? This is, compassion is a good topic. Yeah. Sorry, I apologize for being naughty. So what we find, one of the interesting things that we find in the life story of the Buddha is that very often when we look at that life story of the Buddha, we talk about the idea of a bodhisattva. Yeah, a bodhisattva is someone who has been around for a long time, for maybe many eons, and practicing. This is kind of the standard Buddhist view of how the Buddha became the Buddha. So he started, according to this story, he started off 4 incalculable eons ago or something like that, and he made a vow under a Buddha in the past. Said to be 28 Buddhas in the past, and he was this was called the Buddha Dipankara. Dipankara, yeah, okay, Dipankara, and our Buddha that we're still kind of following now, Buddha Gautama, he was known as Sumedha at that time, and under this Buddha Dipankara, he then supposed to have made a vow and saying, I am going to practice in such a way that I become a Buddha in the future. And the idea behind this is the idea of compassion that lies behind this. Yeah, the idea that he can see the suffering in the world and he wants to help the whole world. And to do that, he has to achieve awakening, enlightenment, and then he actually becomes the Buddha based on that idea of compassion. That is what lies behind that story. Yeah, and this is kind of a traditional story that you will read about in most Buddhist countries, and you will find references in more obscure parts of the Pali canon as well to these kind of things. But is it the word of the Buddha? And the answer is no. So if it isn't the word of the Buddha, then is it true? Did it really happen in this way? And the answer is that this is really more to be understood as a legend, a way, a mythology of the Buddha, how we kind of came to know the Buddha after he passed away. And one of the things I always like to point out, you can imagine if you have the greatest spiritual teacher in human history, that's how I regard the Buddha, by a long way, right, the greatest spiritual teacher in human history. And if you have that, and one day he dies, imagine the impact on that community. It would have been a very, very powerful impact. The sense of loss would have been enormous. When you such a towering figure who you always go to and ask questions about all kinds of things. And one day he's gone. You can't ask questions anymore. What did you mean by this, Master? That question can no longer exist. So it's a very, very difficult period for that Buddhist community. Imagine if the Buddhist society here lost Ajahn Brahm. Where would we be? It would be different. It would be very different feeling in this Buddhist society. So I tell you, practice now while we still have spiritual geniuses like Ajahn Brahm around, because it will not last all that long. And yet Ajahn Brahm is not the Buddha. Imagine if it was the Buddha who disappeared. Even more, far more powerful again. And because of that, after the Buddha passes away, they start to ask the question, well, who was this teacher of ours? We don't know that much about him. He told a few stories about his life. We can kind of stitch that together and make a kind of biography. But actually, we don't really understand properly where he came from. And then the story starts to get developed. I think I remember he said something about that. Yeah, okay, I better write that down. And then gradually the story expands. And then later, hundreds of years after the Buddha, you get scriptures like what is called the Charya Pitaka. Charya Pitaka means the basket of conduct, which then explains the conduct of the Buddha over vast amounts of time and how he came to become the Buddha eventually. But it's legend. It was created after the time of the Buddha. If you really want to find out why the Buddha became the Buddha, you have to go to the Suitors, the early discourse where the Buddha himself explains what he did. And there, very interestingly, and this goes against the common understanding of Buddhism, we do not find compassion as a motivation for why the Buddha went forth, why he decided to become a monk, why he decided to become awakened. Isn't that kind of amazing? Have you ever thought of that before? Maybe some of you have, and maybe some of you have heard of my Suitors before, probably heard these kind of things before, but it actually goes against the kind of whole idea of the Buddha. The Buddha is someone who becomes awakened because of compassion for the world. And when I now say, it's like I'm overturning the received wisdom of so many generations of Buddhists. But anyone who has read the Sutras will agree with me, that will know that this is basically the truth. So why did the Buddha, or the Buddha-to-be, I should say, why did he decide to renounce the ordinary life? What was his motivation for doing that, if it wasn't compassion? And what the Buddha says in his autobiography, because he will often tell his life, and he will tell his life to inspire us to practice in the same way, so we understand what he did, we should be doing the same thing. And what he says was that he looked out across, he just looked from his ordinary experience of life. And when he saw in his ordinary experience of life the amount of suffering that we have to go through, he was looking at his own life really, and he saw in particular three things, and those three things are illness, old age, and death. These are the three things that he was talking about, the three things that he kind of, in a few different places, he said was the motivating factor for him to go forth. It's kind of fascinating because it's really about he sees a problem in his own life. And because he sees a problem in his own life, he wants to find a solution to that problem. That's why he decides to become a monk. It's kind of, this is really the thing. Death contemplation here is very central. The idea, I'm going to die. So if I'm going to die, this world kind of loses a bit of its luster. Because all the things I accumulate, all the things I build up, it's going to have to go. This is what the Buddha talks about in a famous sutta known as the Noble Search. It's called the Arya Pariyesana Sutta in Pali. I always like to use a few Pali words because it sounds really cool, and people you become get more authority when you use some long, difficult Pali words. Arya Pariyesana Sutta. And this sutta, it means the noble search. The Buddha distinguishes between the noble search and the ignoble search. And he says that, I myself, I'm subject to old age, death and illness. And then I go into the world and I seek other people and other things that are also subject to the same things. I might get myself a wife, children, other relatives. I might get cattle or animals that I kind of use for farming purposes. All of these things are subject to exactly the same problem I am subject to. I'm kind of multiplying, making a problem worse. And then I attach to these things, which is inevitable. We always have attachments. And so we're actually making and that's what he calls the ignoble search. When we go out into the world searching for things that we attach to, and then that will sooner or later have to die, have to pass away, have to disappear from our life. The Buddha is pretty he doesn't, he really kind of lays down the law, and it's really strong things, So he says, in that case, what I should do instead is the noble search, not the ignoble search. And the noble search, if I already have a problem for myself, instead of seeking for other things that also have the same problem, I should seek for something else. I should seek for the end of the problem within me, the end of old age, the end of illness, and most important of all, the end of death. And then the search for the end of death a solution to that problem. That is what drives the Buddha to become a monastic. That is the reason, not really compassion. Yeah, or we can say maybe compassion for himself, yeah, but not compassion for the whole world. And there's something very powerful about that, yeah. And one of the obvious reasons why that is correct and why that has to be the case is that you need to know that there is a solution to the problem before you can teach others. Why have compassion for others? It's kind of assuming that you find a solution. First of all, you have to find the solution. Then the compassion will arise. I have a solution. I know how I can help people. That's what, that's why you start living as a Buddha. But I also just want to comment briefly on this audacity of the Buddha. Yeah, the idea that you see that death is a problem, and then you say, oh yeah, death is a problem, I'll find a solution to death. Not many people think like that. Yeah, it's really audacious. Death is like, no one ever thinks, yeah, I'm living here in Perth, let me just walk into the bush and find a solution to death. How many people do you know like that? It's kind of, you think, oh yeah, you write them off as a complete nutcase if they did that. Yeah, no one finds a solution to death by walking off into the bush. But that is pretty much what the Buddha did. So it's kind of very audacious. Yeah, it's like there's something about death which is inevitable. How can you possibly find a solution to that? It just seems completely impossible. So why even bother trying? But that is what the Buddha did. And this is kind of one of the things that make the Buddha such a powerful figure. He was willing to challenge things and to do things that no one else really was able or could do. This is some of the spiritual power that the Buddha came with when he was born into this world, that enabled him eventually to become the Buddha. So some of these things about the Buddha, you may not think about it when you read the Suitors, but there's something really extraordinary about that idea. I'm just going to go into the forest and find a solution to death. And it's kind of mind-boggling. Of course, he lived in a society where these kind of questions were asked, and that's why it was probably a bit easier now than it's a bit different from just walking into the bush here in Australia, but still, it's kind of remarkable. So it wasn't really compassion. It was finding a solution to the dying that was the problem, or the motivation factor for the Buddha to be. So then he goes off, he practices under a few teachers, and he obviously has success under those teachers, but doesn't find the final solution to what he's looking for. Then he goes through the period of ascetic practices. If you know the life of the Buddha, many of you here will know the life of the Buddha fairly well. Go through the period of ascetic practices, that doesn't really work out. And then he sort of, he comes to a halt because things aren't working out. So what should I do? And then one night he has this insight. Well, the ascetic practices, the self-mortification, they call it, self-torment, if you like, just to be clear what this actually means. Self-torment doesn't work. Indulging in the sensuality of the world doesn't work, because he did that when he was kind of a young man living at home. He had a wealthy upbringing, This is described in the Suitors as well. Not super wealthy, but wealthy by the standards of the time. And this doesn't work either. What am I going to do? And then he decides, well, the path forward is actually these deep states of meditation called the jhanas. That is the path forward. And that is where he then discovered the awakening experience after this profound state of samadhi. This is sometimes called the night of his awakening, but we don't really know if it was a night or it extended over a longer period. Probably extended over a longer period. So that is the Buddha. That's how it reached his awakening. What happened then after his awakening? And then, of course, we assume that compassion would have to arise at some point. But there's actually an interesting story there as to how that happened. Obviously, he became a teacher eventually, otherwise we wouldn't be here. So at some point, the compassion would have had to arisen in him. How did that happen? And the way that it happened was that initially, the Buddha said, I thought, too difficult to teach the Dhamma. No one will understand anyway. So I'm just going to relax. I'm going to chill. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to attain jhanas. He didn't use exactly those words, but kind of roughly that kind of ballpark. And so he wasn't inclined to teach in the Dhamma. And you can imagine, if you have just reached the kind of most profound insight into the nature of reality, into the nature of what it means to be a human being, it's kind of hard to explain to others, right? To say the least. It's kind of impossible. You can imagine how, even if you have a deep state of meditation, it can be really hard to explain to others what's going on. And this is why you will hear sometimes in the spiritual world, you will hear people say, oh, they have an ineffable experience. And the word ineffable means something that cannot be explained in words. It is beyond being explained in words. That's why it's called ineffable. And I would think that maybe that's what the Buddha felt. This experience, ineffable, can't be explained to anyone. So if you can't explain, no point in explaining. So I'm just going to enjoy my meditation or whatever. No point in trying to do the impossible. And actually, if you look at kind of the world outside of Buddhism as well, where you have people who have good meditation experiences, often they call these meditation experiences ineffable. But actually, they are not really ineffable, because once the Buddha put his mind to it, he was able to explain these experiences, regardless of how profound they were. And this is one of those geniuses of the Buddha. Experience that the vast majority of the world call ineffable, the Buddha said, this is the way it is. So he explains things like deep states of samadhi, the profound stillnesses of the mind, called jhana experience and samadhi experiences. And he explains it in a way that is kind of extraordinary. And I know Ajahn Brahmsana said to me, I don't know how the Buddha did that, how he was able to explain the jhana in such a precise way, because these are kind of otherworldly things. How can these things even be explained? But this is part of the genius of the Buddha. It can be explained. And the reason it can be explained is that any experience you have always has some tie to your ordinary experiences. There's always something there that you can kind of grasp hold of and has some relation to the ordinary experiences. Things like joy and bliss and stillness. These are ideas. We have some idea about them. And for that reason, you can explain even the most profound things in the world. So the Buddha thought initially, probably too ineffable, no need to try experience it. And then there is this beautiful legend and myth that kind of comes into this teaching. Whether this is really happened or is mythology, I think is mythology. There is some evidence for that. I'm not going to go into that evidence here and now. This is a story of this Brahma. A Brahma is like this very high divine being. It's like a divine being who's kind of, encompasses a whole universe, if you like. And this Brahma happened to be a mate of the Buddha's in a previous life. So I'm going to see how my mate, Gautama is doing. So he comes down to the Buddha, and he realized the Buddha has had some profound experience, because this Brahma obviously also had some very deep meditation previously. And he comes down to the Buddha, and he bows down to the Buddha, and he says, please, Master, please teach. Please teach out of compassion for the world. Please teach, because if you don't teach, there are many beings out there with little dust in their eyes. And if you don't teach them, they will have serious problems. It will be a disaster for them. They have little dust in their eyes. They will understand the teaching if you start teaching them. So this is where the compassion starts to arise. It's like you have to ignite that little spark in the mind of the Buddha to get him going, to get him started. And then he gets the motivating factor that enables him then to kind of do something that drives him in the right direction. And then the Buddha listens to the Brahma. And then when he listens to the Brahma afterwards, he says to this Brahma, he says, well, it was because I thought no one would understand. That is why I didn't teach the Dhamma. But, thank you for, I didn't say thank you for asking, I can't remember, what did he say again? He says something like that. And he says, oh, now the doors to the deathless are open. I will open the doors to the deathless for them. And this is kind of the saying that I will teach about Nibbana and the highest spiritual practices. And then he surveys the world. He surveys the world with a Buddha eye, seeing beings in various kind of states of spiritual qualities or whatever. And then he sees, and he uses. This is where the word compassion comes in. He surveys the world out of compassion, and he sees beings with weak and strong faculties, with good and bad qualities, beings that are advanced and beings that are not advanced. And when he sees that, then he makes the determination to teach. That is where the compassion comes in. The Buddha sees beings in the world in this way. Then the compassion arises. So the idea of compassion is like this broad idea. It is not focused on individuals. It is not focused on anyone in particular. It's this broad idea of understanding the suffering in the world and the knowledge inside of you that you have, that you can help because you have found a solution to precisely this problem. That is what the search about finding the end of death is about. It's about finding the end, finding the solution to the problem of suffering, because it is as if the idea of death, it encompasses all the suffering of life within it, because that is when you have to let go in such a big way. So this is where it kind of arises, and that is where the whole impulse of the Buddha, the compassion of the Buddha, comes from. And one of the things that is very interesting here is that you will notice that the only thing that drives the Buddha to do anything is compassion. Yeah, this is the thing that motivates. There is nothing else to drive a Buddha to do anything in the world, because the Buddha doesn't have any self-interest. He doesn't think, I'm going to get rich. If I teach, I have a deep knowledge. I will get many people to support me. I'll get many disciples. It's cool to have disciples. It gives him more power and these kind of things. The Buddha didn't have any ego anymore. It was all gone. He didn't want to amass anything external. When you are a Buddha, all you want to do is sit in deep meditation, because that is where you find the greatest satisfaction. External things, at the best, they are a distraction to the inner happiness. The last thing you want is many disciples. The last thing you want is riches and fame, because it destroys your ability to have deep meditation. So there's nothing in that world that is of any interest. Ordinary teachers in the world, they teach for a salary, or they may teach because of whatever reason, for whatever it is, to maybe have people listen to them or whatever. But the Buddha is different. There's no vested interest that kind of drives him to teach. It's only coming from compassion, nothing else. It's actually a hassle for the Buddha to have to teach. He'd rather avoid it, but he does it. Why does he do it? Because he has our best interest at heart. Because he's there to help each one of us. He taught to help you. You. That's why he taught. Because remember, one of my favorite ideas about the Buddha, when he started teaching 2,500 years ago, he knew that there were people far away in the future who would teach these teachings. So he did have compassion for everyone who was to listen to those teachings. So he did have compassion for every one of us here today. For me, Venerable Metaji, Venerable Vipassito, our president, Hok Chin, everyone here today, he had compassion for you. Isn't that kind of amazing to think about that? He gave these teachings for your purpose. This is the greatest spiritual genius in the world who taught specifically for you. Take that on board, and when you take that on board, next time you read the Buddha's teachings, they will feel very different to you. Here is someone talking to you purely out of kindness because he cares for your well-being. He'd rather not teach because it's still a hassle for him. He does it anyway because he does it out of kindness. Read those Suitors and they start to look different, because suddenly every word matters. Well, he's saying this to me. Okay, I better read this carefully. You don't become so critical anymore, because you understand that these teachings are coming from compassion. They're not said to kind of give you a hard time or anything. Even if he might tell you things that at first sight may seem, wow, that's asking a bit too much, because you know, or at least you think, or you have good reason to think that it's coming from compassion. You take even the difficult teachings seriously. You take them aboard. You think, let me think about that. Let me not reject it out of hand, because there's something very profound going on here. So the idea that these teachings of the Buddha come from compassion is a very beautiful idea that allows you to open up your mind, open up your heart, and receive this teaching in a more profound way. I'm not saying you should discard the critical faculties. Never discard the critical faculties, because there are always issues. There are always problems about how it relates to you. There are always textual problems. But I'm also saying, don't be too critical. Don't come with a kind of fault-finding mind when you read these things. Find that middle way here, where you take on board the good teachings in a positive spirit, knowing that they're coming from compassion. Not just compassion, also from wisdom, the highest wisdom of understanding the human connection. It's kind of powerful, isn't it? The highest wisdom of understanding fully the human condition combined with compassion. It's really kind of awesome when you hear that. So this is the Buddha. Yeah, this is who the Buddha is, driven by compassion. He is compassion, if you like, compassion incarnate, compassion and wisdom in the flesh. That is who the Buddha is. So then the question arises, do we practice that compassion like the Buddha, or at least a little bit like the Buddha? I'm not saying you should go out and teach the whole world. You don't have to do that, but a little bit like the Buddha. Are we leaning in the right direction, or are we sometimes getting it a bit wrong? Yeah? And I want to talk about couple of pitfalls, first of all, about when we practice compassion. And sometimes when you read about Buddhist practitioners around the world, you realize that sometimes they get it completely wrong. They have misunderstood what the idea of compassion is. And I remember some time ago I was reading about these practitioners who had this practice of taking on the whole pain of the world. Yeah, this is kind of one of these practitioners. All the pain in the world, I want to take it on. And what they said was the result of that. After doing that for a long period of time, they lost all their energy. They lost their ability to function in an ordinary way because it was just too overwhelming. Yeah, they were emotionally kind of malfunctioning almost, and they were blocked inside because the pain was just so overwhelming. They didn't know how to deal with it. And so this is doing it in the wrong way. And what is wrong with that is basically the idea that you are, when you take on the pain of the world, what you're doing, it's a kind of empathy. Yeah? And this is one of the first things that we need to distinguish on the Buddhist path, is make the distinction between empathy on the one hand and compassion on the other hand. These are two quite separate things. And unless we understand and separate these things apart, we can actually go wrong. And this is what happened here. These practitioners basically going the wrong way here. So the difference between empathy and compassion, and this was nicely summarized in something I read not so long ago, is that empathy is feeling with, whereas compassion is feeling for. Feeling with versus feeling for. And when you feel with, it is like you take on the other person's pain. You are there. You kind of almost feel what they are feeling. Yeah? And there's nothing kind of inherently wrong with that. I mean, sometimes that is the case. Yeah, if you're with someone in great pain, you will feel some of their pain. You know what that can be like sometimes. But it's important not to take that too far. And it's important to transform that, going from empathy and moving on to compassion. That is the critical thing that we need to do. Yeah, so we don't get stuck in this thing that can drain you of energy and move towards something which, instead of just draining you of energy, looks for a solution to the problem. If you think back to what the Buddha was doing, the Buddha was saying, okay, I have the solution to the problem of humanity. I know the answer what everyone is looking for. That's why he had compassion for the world. He wanted to help. Yeah. So compassion is this urge to help, this urge to care for, look after, to make sure people are okay and that they are safe in a sense. That is the idea of compassion. It is a positive thing. It's a positive movement forward. That is what compassion is about. Whereas empathy is taking on board all of these emotions of other people. And so can be problematic. It's problematic also for other reasons, empathy. Empathy often has to do with individuals. When you feel with somebody, it's usually an individual person that you feel with. And because you feel with that person, then you want to help that particular person perhaps. So you get kind of a narrow field of understanding, a narrow field of action, focusing on individuals. But the Buddhist idea is really to broaden out your mind, and to have that compassion for the whole world, not focus on individuals, where you kind of get a kind of this narrow sense of morality which doesn't really spread out to the whole world. And you want to kind of spread it out, make it broad and wide, that encompasses everything, rather than being narrow and being selective in that way. So there's a lot to be said for compassion. So what the Buddha was doing was not really empathy, because when he was looking at the whole world, he saw the general suffering in the world, and he wanted to help with a solution to that problem. That was compassion that the Buddha was doing. So the Pali word behind this is karuna, and karuna then means compassion and not empathy. It's one of those important points. I remember myself sometimes, we do quite a bit of walking meditation at our monastery. I don't know if you have been down to our monastery. Have you been to our monastery? Anyone hasn't been to our monastery? You should come down and check it out. Come down on a day we have an open day in the monastery. You can see where the monks live in the forest and these kind of things. And one of the things that you will see, you have a small kuti. Kuti is like a hut, 7 square meters, something like that. That's where we live. But one of the most important parts of the kuti is that it has a walking path attached to it. So you can walk back and forth, called walking meditation. And I did that at the time of the Buddha. It's called chankama in the Suitors. And so this is actually a very nice thing to do. If you sit too long, it comes a point when you need a bit of walking. So you go out and you walk. And because the walking path is outside, even though it has a roof, it is open on the sides, it's a half wall, very often you get insects coming onto the walking path. And you get maybe ants coming in, or you get these centipedes coming in. These are the 2 most common creatures we find on our walking path. And when you get that, when you start out as a Buddhist, okay, I have to keep my precepts, I better get rid of those ants so I don't step on them. I go, get rid of the ants, Not much compassion there, just get rid of them because I'm keeping my precepts. I don't really care so much about you, but, I've got to keep my precepts. And this is quite a common feeling, in Buddhism. We have to keep our precept. It doesn't necessarily mean that we come from compassion. So remember that keeping the precept of not killing, that's only the beginning. But what you really want to do is you want to evolve that into real compassion for those beings. That's when that first precept really is powerful and really useful. You want to go from just being kind of kind out of obligation, out of kind of habit or whatever, to be real kindness from inside. And this is what I could see happening in me over the years. It's kind of interesting to see that happening with yourself. Initially, ants, get out of the way. You're in the way. I'm walking meditation here, Don't, you're bothering me, stupid ants. Can't you understand? It's kind of... And then over time, something happens in you. And you actually, when there is an ant there, you kind of get this feeling, I don't want to destroy this life. It feels really wrong to want to destroy life. It feels bad. You know that this little being there, it wants to live. Just like you want to live. The distance between us and an ant, isn't that great after all? We both want to live. We both want to be as happy as we possibly can. How can I destroy that life? And there's no way you would want to step on an ant, No way after a while. You always step to the side if you can. And then, when it comes to sweeping the ants or the centipedes off the path, you're no longer kind of brusque, but you gently sweep them aside, in a gentle way, and you wish them well, somewhere else. There's a little bit of self-interest there, of course, but that's kind of required. Okay, so off you go, out of the way. And it's such a beautiful transformation when you see that. And I was just working in the forest today, when we were working together, we're marking up some areas we're going to build walking paths in the forest, and we had all this marsh flies. You know the marsh flies? These kind of really large blood-sucking creatures. And I must admit, I was having a bit of difficulty having compassion for these marsh flies, especially when there's 10 of them ganging together, kind of attacking you from all sides. I was having. Did you have a hard time having compassion for them, Venerable, or were you kind of? Or you were? They kind of left me alone. You left you alone. They were going after me. That's true. Okay, well, it's really unfair for you. But that's compassion. That's one way of understanding what compassion is, Because with that ant, you don't really have empathy for the ant because you don't really know what they feel, The ant is kind of too hard to know what they feel, but you certainly can have compassion for the ant because you know that they want to live just like you want to live. It's interesting. I was reading some scientific findings recently about insects, and people are discovering that insects have more and more of the same qualities like all other animals have and human beings have, that they want to live, they want pleasure, all of these things. They have kind of gradually finding out the secrets of the insect's life as well. And of course we could have told them long ago, being Buddhists, but science needs to find out at its own pace, right? And so gradually we're kind of uncovering these things, which is great. So that is the idea of compassion, develop that in your life. Develop that not only towards insects, develop it towards people as well. Sometimes it's easier towards animals than to people, because people are kind of so complicated. Yeah, it's kind of, you don't know what you're doing sometimes. But anyway, of course, we have compassion for everyone. Yeah. That is the first problem we have to be careful with. That is the idea of compassion. Empathy. Compassion is okay. Empathy can be problematic. Yeah, not always, can be. The second thing that we have to be careful with is pity. Yeah, pity is sometimes a condescending feeling. Yeah. Pity is like you look a little bit down upon the other person. Yeah. You think, yeah, they are suffering, miserable, sod, they kind of... and you have a kind of... You're looking down upon the person because you think that they are just, they're living under a bridge or whatever, and they are not really looking after themselves. They could have done better if they wanted to. They don't deserve my... or they deserve a little bit of compassion, but I will look down upon them, And this is actually a fairly common problem. People say this to me. They say that, probably to all monks, but they say that, I try to be compassionate and try to be kind to people, but then I look down upon them at the same time. How do I avoid that? And this is another enemy of compassion, the idea of pity, when we are condescending towards other people. We'd like to help others, but we don't really want to be helped so much ourselves. Yeah, we feel that we want to be independent, but we're happy to help others. It's like you're putting yourself in a slightly higher position. And of course, straight away, when you put yourself in a higher position, other people have to be relatively lower. Yeah, that's just the way things are. So how do we overcome that problem? Because apparently it is quite common. Well, the way to overcome that is to remember that we also have been in that position before. Maybe you see a poor person sleeping rough in the city. We also have slept rough probably in a past life. And unless we get out of this human condition, we will probably do it again in the future. So when you see that poor person in great difficulty, person with great illness, person wallowing in whatever misery they have in their life, see yourself in that person. That's me in there. That is already inside of me waiting to come out. When you see someone with really bad cancer, emaciated and really in a terrible state, that is me right there. And when you make that jump and you say, this is me here, you can no longer look down upon them, because you're looking down upon yourself if you look down upon that person. But all of these different people in the world, whatever they are, they're already inside of us waiting to come out. Given the right cause and conditions, they will come out. It's a powerful way of thinking about life, because it makes you able to sympathize and to have compassion for everyone in the world without conceit, without looking down upon anyone, but having a sense of equality. We're all in this together. You are sick, actually it's my problem too. That's why I will help you, because if I help you, I'm actually helping myself, because I will one day be in the same position. That is the way to think about it. And when you think about it in that way, you won't have this problem of feeling pity or condescension towards those people who are in an unfortunate situation in this world. So try to avoid those two problems, Not too much empathy, pity, if it is of the condescending variety, avoid that, of course. So what should we do then? And first of all, before I discussing briefly a little bit more about what to do, I want to make a distinction also between metta and karuna, between loving kindness and compassion. And this is an important distinction to make, and one of the things that you find in the Suitors, the word of the Buddha, is that these are part of the 4 Brahma Viharas, which literally means something like divine abidings. So when you practice these qualities, it's like a divine abiding, says the Buddha. Why is that? Well, because these kind of gods in the very high realms, they got reborn in those realms because they had those qualities. So you are developing kind of godlike qualities inside of yourself if you have lots of loving kindness. Kind of nice, isn't it? You're coming closer to the gods. And the gods are beautiful beings. They are radiant because their good qualities show in their body as well. They are radiant splendor. Maybe, I don't know if you believe in these gods, but I believe in them. The Buddha said they are there. It's because the Buddha said so. I think they are there. Not just the Buddha. I know many people who say they are there. So you are developing these divine qualities inside of yourself. That's why they're called Brahma Viharas. But the interesting thing, there's 4 Brahma Viharas. The first one is metta, loving kindness. The second one is karuna, compassion. Now, one of the things about the Buddhist teachings is that nothing is really random. Sequences are there for a purpose. So if metta comes first, there is a reason for that. And the reason is that metta is a quality that you cannot really get wrong. Because metta, loving kindness or friendliness, this is the idea of seeing the good qualities in people around us. If you have a good friend, why are they a good friend? They are a good friend because you see the good qualities in that person. If you saw only bad qualities, then you wouldn't be a friend, right? And the closer friend they are, the more you see their good qualities. The Pali word mitta is related to the word mitta. Mitta means friend in Pali. Mitra. We have one of our core members of the Buddhist side. His name is Mitra. His surname. It's an Indian name. Means friend. It's nice, isn't it? That's your family name. And so this is the first thing. So seeing good qualities in other people is always positive. So whenever we have the opportunity to see good qualities in others, we should see them. And it's not that difficult when you're part of a Buddhist society like this to see good qualities in the people around you, because there are so many good qualities here, and there are so many people who are at least trying. And what a wonderful thing that is, that people are at least trying. They may not be perfect. Actually, they're probably not perfect. But they are leaning in the right direction. And that in itself is a very beautiful and honorable thing that is worthy of our respect. So it's not hard. Look around you. Don't fault find too much with your fellows here in the Buddhist Society, because these are all good people. I usually ask people, is there anyone here who is not good? And no one ever raises their hand, so you're all good, yeah? So that's okay. It's okay to feel that you are a good person. It's a good feeling inside. You feel a sense of warmth for yourself. It's okay to feel that. Don't make it into an ego thing. But it's perfectly okay to feel that you are a good person. So that is the first part. And then comes compassion. And the reason why compassion comes second, compassion is a little bit more tricky. It's more easy to go wrong. Too much empathy and it paralyzes you. Too much pity and you become condescending. It has more kind of enemies, more areas to go wrong with compassion. And that's why metta comes first, then comes compassion. In reality, we have to develop both almost at the same time, because we cannot always have metta. It isn't always possible to have, see good qualities in other people or in animals. Then compassion comes in. But remember that kind of hierarchy here. So how does Buddha describe this compassion in the Suitors? I've already given you some examples from the Buddha's own life. But one of the most memorable ways that he describes it, and this gives you a very nice idea for what it actually means in the Suitors. And the Buddha says, imagine that there is a person and they are walking along a wilderness track. There's no one around. There's no people to support them or to help them. There's no village. The next village is far away, or both before and ahead of you. And this person then falls ill. They become sick while walking along this wilderness track. There's no one to help them. So what is your feeling for that person when that happens? Well, when you see that happening, you're kind of looking from afar. You can't really intervene because you're too far away or whatever. It's like you're seeing them on TV or something like that. And the feeling that arises inside of you is, may this person find a doctor. May they find some medicine. May they find a nurse to help them. May they find some supportive people somewhere that can support them. Why? Well, because if they don't get some support, they will surely die right there on that forest track. That is compassion. This sense of distance, you're not right there with them. You can't really see their feelings, but you wish them well. You are looking to a solution to the problem. May they find a solution. It's like you're caring for that person. That's the idea. That idea of caring and helping, wanting them out of that situation. That is what compassion is about. It becomes very clear when you see that particular simile in the Suitors. That is what we're striving for. So first, metta. First, the loving kindness to the people around you. Then this kind of compassion where you want to help and you want to support people around you. You never want to hurt anyone. The Buddha says that if you develop compassion fully, you cannot hurt another being. Because if you can hurt another being, he says, well, it means that you haven't developed compassion fully. Yeah, so you need to carry it on. You need to take it further. Yeah. So how can we do this in our own life? And one of the most important places to have compassion is towards yourself. There's some nice findings in psychology, for example, that self-compassion is a very powerful way of dealing with the problems in life and problems in the world. So make sure you have compassion for yourself. Yeah. And when you have compassion for yourself, you will have compassion for others, because it never stops with oneself. It goes out to others as well. And when you have compassion for others, you will have compassion for yourself, because you can't really distinguish. These are feelings that kind of go everywhere. But have compassion for yourself. And I recently had the experience. I was talking to someone quite recently who was a person in great distress because they said they had done some awful things in their life and they weren't able to forgive themselves. And I told this person that, you need to have compassion for yourself. Yeah, this is crazy the way you're judging yourself so harshly. You're a good person. Look at your background. You've done all of these other things. And I realized fairly quickly that this person was not able to see that, wasn't able to have compassion. It was like they were blocked from that ability. So please develop this, because when you develop this, it means that when you make a mistake, and we're all going to make mistakes, it means you will be able to let go, to forgive yourself, and then also have compassion for yourself at the same time. It's beautiful when we can do that towards ourselves. Instead of carrying along all of this guilt, and all of these negative things from the past, we can let it go and have compassion. And remember how you do that. Remember that man or that person on the forest track walking around in the wilderness and then getting sick. Yeah, that is what you are like. You're like this man walking, or this person walking along the wilderness track. You don't really know what is going on. Suddenly you just get sick out of nowhere. Sickness here means that one day you start doing something stupid. You don't really know why. It is something that has come, within you, somewhere from the past, a bad habit that you carry from a past life, some kind of program that you're playing out, which was laid down in your mind, in your heart, eons, long, long time ago, many lifetimes ago. It's playing out again inside of you. You don't know why it is there. This idea of compassion is an idea of non-self. It is an idea that as human beings, we are so conditioned by our circumstances, by the people in our life, by our schooling, by everything that's happened since we were born, but also in past life. And past life is like this black box. Yeah, we don't know what happened in the past life, but we know there's something there. If you open up that black box, no, best not to open up. Leave that black box closed, because there's endless of stuff, from the past. But something has brought you to this point. You are blind. You are following along pretty much like a robot. And the more... That was tough, robots. So you are almost like a robot. You're going through these paces without understanding where it comes from. And then the more you see that in yourself, this idea of non-self, of not really being in charge of your own life, means you can have compassion for yourself. I didn't know what I was doing. Jeepers, I was in the darkness. How could I do that? Well, actually I could, because of that conditioning from the past. And then you learn from your mistake. You know now you shouldn't be doing it again. This is critical. You can't just have compassion and not learn, because if you don't learn, you'll do it again. And eventually you run out of compassion even for yourself, and then you have a serious problem. So absolutely learn from it. And then at the same time have compassion, because you know that you're not really very much in charge of your own existence at all. And then you can move forward. Then you can learn. You can change the trajectory of your life. You can have change those habit patterns that have been laid down for such a long period, and you can become a far better person. Compassion makes you resilient. It makes you able to deal with these difficulties that come into your life when you make a mistake, when you go wrong. It makes you able to take the admonishment of other people. If someone says to you, may I say something to you? Yeah. You think, I'm not sure if you're sure about that. And then, but if you have compassion for yourself, you can take these things, because you know that whatever that person says, whether it's right or wrong, you will be able to deal with it, because you know that, okay, if they're right, actually it is an opportunity for me to improve myself. It's one of those nice little verses that you see in the Suitors, where the Buddha says that when someone is criticizing you or giving you admonishment, if they are showing you a treasure. Sometimes we're not clear about ourselves. Sometimes we don't see ourselves very clearly. We don't really know what our own character is because we're too close to ourselves. And sometimes it takes someone on the outside to point out things. So they're showing you a treasure because they give you the opportunity to overcome that hurdle, whatever it might be. So listen to criticism. Not always, because sometimes it is unfair, sometimes it is unreasonable. But often there may be some truth in it. So ask yourself, could it be that they are right? And it may be painful initially to admit that maybe there's a kernel of truth there. But once you admit that to yourself and you combine that with self-compassion, then you can grow as a human being. You can grow on the path. You can overcome some of those obstacles that have been in the way for you for a long time. You wonder, why is my meditation improving? Or maybe that's the reason. And I know this from personal experience because I have also been criticized sometimes, been told off, you are this kind of person. I thought, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And initially you get a bit defensive, you know what it's like. But then you reflect, do they have a point? I always try to reflect when I'm criticized. Do they have a point? And then usually you will find that there is maybe a little bit, at least, in your character which has a little bit of that flaw. And then you ask yourself, well, maybe they are right to some extent. What can I do to overcome that flaw in my character? And in this way, it can become useful. Don't listen to criticism too much because sometimes it gets out of hand. But occasionally, when you feel that maybe this is the right time to criticize, or to listen, especially when someone is coming from a good place, then you can listen to what they have to say. It makes you very resilient when you do this. So have compassion for yourself in this way. And then it starts to become something very powerful in your own life, helping you to let go, helping you to forgive, helping you to move forward on the path. But the Buddha's idea of compassion is an idea of joy. It is an idea that is supposed to elevate us. If you practice compassion in the right way, instead of depleting our energy that empathy can do in certain circumstances, it gives rise to energy. It gives rise to this urge to help. It gives rise to joy inside when you do it in the right way. And there's a beautiful story. This is a story that is in that coronavirus book. I don't know if you read the coronavirus. Actually, coronavirus, right? Karuna means compassion, right? So this is actually, so compassion. So this, I should have mentioned that book in the talk tonight. There's a nice book that we printed for Ajahn Brahm's 70th birthday called Coronavirus. Karuna, corona, almost the same. So in Buddhism, we have the karuna. In the world, they have the coronavirus. We have the coronavirus, the virus of compassion spreading out in society. That's what we're trying to achieve here. So in that book, there is a story which many of you may have heard before, but I'm going to repeat it anyway. So whether you like it or not, compassion, right? That's kind of forcing a story onto it. But some of you may not have heard this story. This is a story from a pilgrimage in India. Every few years we go on pilgrimage in India and we try to see some of those ancient holy sites of Buddhism. Many of you have been there before. Yes, some of you been before, and some of you have not. And the Buddha said that there are these 4 holy places that we should ideally, if we can, visit while we are alive to get some inspiration, have some connection with the Buddha, physical connection. Go to the places where he has. I talked about pilgrimages here before. I'm not going to elaborate too much on it now. And there is 4 places in particular that the Buddha said we should visit. The place where he was born, Lumbini in present-day Nepal. The place where he attained awakening, Bodh Gaya in India and the Bihar state, south of the river Ganges, south of Patna. Then the place where he taught his first teaching, that's when the Dhamma started, that is in the Deer Park in Varanasi, this ancient city in India on the river Ganges. And the last place where the Buddha passed away, Kushinara, north of the river Ganges. And these are the 4 places. And, of course, Ajahn Brahm, he has led a few pilgrimage to these places and many more places as well. And some of these places now are getting very, very touristy. I would recommend you, the sooner you go, the better, because they're getting more touristy every blooming year. Okay, every year. So more and more people coming, more and more noisy, more and more people from all kind of backgrounds. Not everyone is there to have a quiet time. Some of them kind of are walking, having big ghetto blasters and giving Dhamma talks and that big loud chanting and this kind of things. Yeah. So this is what these places have become a little bit. But check it out. And one of the things that when you have these large tourist places, it attracts a lot of beggars. Lots and lots of beggars there. And these beggars in India are probably some of the most insistent beggars you have ever met in your entire life. They will never give up. Yeah? They cling on to you and they don't leave until they get something from you. That's how they function. Yeah, it doesn't matter what you say, doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter if you completely, utterly cold and ignore them. Nothing works. They will kind of grasp onto you until they get something from you. Except this one occasion. And this is what is so cool. Yeah, this was kind of Ajahn Brahm's method of getting rid of beggars. But actually, the point was, it wasn't a method of getting rid of beggars. Yeah, it was just accidental. Yeah, and this is kind of the point. So Ajahn Brahm, like everyone else, he also has a beggar walking next to him. Yeah, this was at Bodh Gaya. This beggar, oh, venerable sir, yeah, bakshish, yeah, give some. Bakshish means money in the kind of language there. And give some. They used to monks having money, so of course, just to take out your wallet and give me a few rupees or whatever. And insisting, yeah, and Ajahn Brahm tells him, I'm a monk, I don't have any money. Bakshish, give. I don't have any money. Bakshish, I don't have any money. Bakshish. That's how it goes on, yeah? You can't get rid of them. And then something happened. And this is kind of the beautiful thing. Yeah, Ajahn Brahm looked at this beggar and he realized this is a person in very difficult situation. Maybe being used by some kind of begging syndicate, miserable with all his limbs kind of crooked and bent in a distorted and all kind of terrible ways, dragging himself along with his hands and his arms. And Ajahn Brahm realized what kind of the pain and the suffering and the problem of this beggar. So he took hold of the beggar and gave the beggar a hug. This is in India. They are dirty. You don't know whether they're criminals. You have no idea who they are. Ajahn Brahm gave them a hug because Ajahn Brahm realized this is a fellow human being in great suffering, in great pain. It's a powerful moment when you do that. You create this connection between human beings, yeah, which probably, maybe this person has never been hugged in his whole life. Because when you are in such a miserable condition, maybe you were stolen from your mum as a baby or something like that. Who knows what the background was? And that was like the transforming moment. At that point, you had transferred something far, far more important than money. You had transferred a direct human connection. And of course, from then on, that beggar left Ajahn Brahm alone. Ajahn Brahm wasn't trying to get rid of the beggar at all. Ajahn Brahm made a connection to another human being. And the result was that beggar left Ajahn Brahm alone. It was like the instant comic result. Yeah. So it's a beautiful example of compassion. And you can see how compassion like that gives rise to joy. Yeah, the beggar then had probably a smile on his face. Yeah, for the first time for a long time, felt some real love in this human realm, which can be so hard to find sometimes. And then he went off and did whatever. This is what we're trying to do. Don't have to go hug all the beggars in India. Please don't try that. If you try, likely it will fail. It has to be something happen spontaneously, naturally. If you try to do it, it's not going to work. But live these kind of ideas in your ordinary life. Have compassion for people. Help out when you can, when somebody's in need. And when you do that, you will be able to build up that joy inside of yourself. And then you are on this beautiful ladder. This thing I talked about when I gave a talk here last time, this idea of the dependent liberation ladder. From that joy, that's the starting point that allows your meditation to develop and allows your mind to go into deep states of stillness and samadhi. That is where it comes from. From the joy comes the tranquility. From the tranquility comes the happiness. From the bliss and happiness comes the stillness of the mind, because happiness draws the mind in and it allows the mind to become still as a consequence. This is then becomes a power of your meditation. Or, as the Buddha said, another way of doing this is once you start to give rise to that feeling of compassion, when you bring it into your meditation, you can expand it out to the whole universe. Gradually, stage by stage, Because there are beings in this universe, wherever you go in this universe, even if you go to far distant galaxies, there will be aliens. The aliens also need compassion. Isn't that right? Aliens are also suffering. Why? Because they live in a world just like ours. They probably look a bit like us anyway. So the whole universe is pervaded with life. So spread out your compassion to the whole universe. And as you spread it out in this way, you're doing this Brahma Vihara practice as it described in the Suitors. And if you do it in the right way, building it up, it then also takes you to the deep states of samadhi as a consequence. So this is what we're trying to do with compassion. You live it out in daily life, bring it back to your meditation practice, and eventually it will be a support for attaining deep states of samadhi. And of course that in turn will then take you all the way to awakening if you keep on practicing even further. Okay, everyone. That is all for tonight. May you all have a nice night, a nice weekend, and a nice everything. And then hopefully see you again. Let's just pay respect to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha before we leave.
මේ සංසාර ගමනින් එතර වෙන්නත් බුදුරජාණන් වහන්සේ දේශනා කරනවා ධම්ම රතයක්. මෙන්න මේ ධර්මය නැමැති රතයෙන්